Happy Wednesday, team.
Howdy,
Hey
team.
guys.
Hey guys.
What have you been up to, Ash?
Just getting back into it. Yep, very much interesting conversations off the back of people being away, in line with my theme of the week. But it's always interesting to see what people thinking post-break, where I find that some people didn't think about work at all and just like took time off, whereas others come back energized with a new idea or a new derivative of what they were already working on. So it's really interesting to have those conversations straight after the new year and holiday season.
So true.
Yeah.
What have you been up to, Jack?
Just keeping it low key. Little Louis, looking after him, looking after Anna as well. So
in last week's episode, the edit, Jack, there was like a series of sentences like, yeah, and I'm using my fucking mates as the trades and they're really fucking pissing me off. They don't understand. So I pulled a few of those out just to balance it.
I didn't even realise. Yeah, there you go.
It's the angriest I have ever. It's just like, I got a kid at home.
Oh, that's funny.
And then Ash, my favourite one of yours was a line something like,
oh God.
Like, I normally buy the same yogurt, but then sometimes I go completely off the rails buying yogurt. I was like, off the rails with yogurt? You and I have very different off the rails.
Oh, I am well aware. Aaron, let's just say my insurance would be a lot cheaper.
Well, shall we get into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
I thought we might kick off with something that had come out just as we were recording last week. It was from Matt Vitale of Birchal, who we've had on the podcast, and he was announcing that pretty well straight after Christmas, effective immediately, he was stepping down not only from the CEO role but moving on from the business, holus bolus. I'll just read some of the post. It said, after some deep reflection over the break, I've made the difficult decision to step away from my role at Birchal after 8 amazing years. Creating Birchal, Australia's equity crowdfunding platform, has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. Building an industry supporting hundreds of inspiring founders to achieve their dreams and help shape the future we want to see are achievements I'm immensely proud of. He goes on to say, but the reality is that building a business comes at a great cost. It requires an extraordinary commitment and takes a personal toll. Over the years, we've navigated immense challenges, and while my resilience and stamina have often felt limitless, in 2024, I found my limit and pushed past it. Birchal is now in an incredible position with fantastic teams steering the ship to calmer waters as economic conditions improve. I'm confident that the best is yet to come for Birchal, and I'm excited to watch the team achieve even greater milestones. As for me, I'm a bit broken. I need time to repair and recuperate. I've realized the importance of stepping back to prioritize my health and well-being. So for now, I'll focus on mastering the art of being still, or at least trying, and spend more time with those that I love. So that was a big announcement.
Yeah, big announcement. And he references their mental health and burnout, and Matt, wishing you all the best. I think it's an important reminder for founders that they do have to manage themselves through the journey, because it is ridiculously hard. And in this case, Matt's made this decision. And so, yeah, wishing him all the best. It is immediately after a cap raise, and we don't have the inside knowledge on what was discussed at a board level or otherwise. But managing that with the investors that came in will, I imagine, be an interesting conversation, because I didn't see this kind of disclosed or discussed as part of that round. But I understand that founder mentality of wanting to leave the company in a good shape before departing and wanting to make sure that there's resources there. I completely understand that drive, and it'd be interesting to see what the transition's going to look like now.
Yeah, on that transition, in a post from Birchal themselves that Matt had forwarded, said, after 6 truly transformative years as Birchal CEO and co-founder, Matt Vitale has made the decision to step down. But what it says is, to ensure a seamless transition, we've engaged Kirsten Hunter, MD at Techstars and former CEO and co-founder at Future Super, in advisory role as CEO transition lead, effective immediately. Kirsten brings a wealth of experience and will provide critical support to the team as we conduct a comprehensive search for a new CEO. I like the idea of this role of CEO transition lead on an advisory basis, but we've discussed it multiple times on the podcast. It is the least ideal way to transition abruptly. So for founders out there, we absolutely wish Matt all the best, but I think the lessons, and I think he would probably share the same, given the time we've spent with him, is do your best not to wait until only an abrupt exit is the right thing for you, because it's really hard. And the reason why abrupt transitions are really difficult is that founders build companies, and especially founder CEOs build companies that are like a well-tailored suit to them, who they like to work with, how they like to operate. The systems and processes are built essentially around them. And also entrepreneurs find it difficult to realize their genius. Like if it was easy, everyone would do it. Actually, it takes a special person to actually pull off not only just starting a business, but actually getting it to the point that Matt's got this business to. And what that means is they underestimate all the little micro corrections that they do day to day, the little pushes in the right directions, a little bit of energy, the solving a problem when it's a really small issue before it flares up into a big issue. And what happens is when that's abruptly taken out of the system, when suddenly that energy and experience and everything else is just taken out, it doesn't really matter the size. I can just point to so many case studies where it's a challenge. Now, I like that there's like a CEO transition lead role, and whether that's successful is really going to come down to, is there a systemic way, a proven approach for handling this transition? And the approach that we've adopted, which is out of the Adhesis Institute, it's been used in 100 or so countries, really looks at the combination of getting the recutting vision, mission, structure, strategy, goals, KPIs, roles and responsibilities. Like there's about 15 different aspects. Now, with our portfolio, or just in my previous consulting life, when a founder had made the decision that they want to move on, to do it well, in inverted commas, took a good 18 months,
John,
sometimes a couple of years.
That was going to be my question to you. So if founders listening to this, they're not sure if they want to move on or whether they are approaching burnout, who should they talk to about the thinking before they've reached the point of, yes, I want to move on, whether they have runway for it to be 18 months or whether they need to do it abruptly? But I'm more thinking, reflecting back on the resilience article that we talked about on the podcast last week, if they're starting to see those signs in themselves or their leadership team or whoever it may be, and they're not sure if or when they do want to exit or take a break, how would Tribe suggest they approach that? Who should they reach out to, have those conversations with? Any ideas or suggestions for founders listening?
Look, it's a good question, and given it's not a high volume of founders that at any one point would be seeking some ideas, like reach out to us. We are absolutely happy just to share, because we use a life cycle model. Depending on where you are in the life cycle, will determine the prescription for how to transition. And so the challenge is there is no one size fits all. Like that analogy of founders building a well-tailored suit for them, depending on where you're in the life cycle, is going to depend on how the suit looks and fits in all the different parts. So probably the easiest answer off the top of the head is that if you are for any reason thinking of transition, just reach out. I've got some blogs and articles and different things that I can shoot, and I may as well I'll put them online anyway. But what tends to happen in my experience is that where burnout sort of comes is when you're doing a lot of the things that you just don't enjoy doing. And often for a CEO and founder, there's a lot of things on your plate that just are somewhere between frustrating and painful, and then sometimes they just build up and they really hurt. I'm not saying that's the case in this situation. I'm just saying generally, if you're in a world where you've got the Venn diagram of what you want things to be and what you think they should be and what they actually are, if they all line up, you tend to find life's pretty manageable. Where the way the world is, but what you want and what you feel should be, where those circles have separated, that's when life becomes a little bit difficult. Now, if you then take it into a more practical basis, if you look at an organization under the PAEI framework that we often talk about, produce, administrate, entrepreneur, integrate, PAEI, they're the 4 roles that an organization has to fulfill, and they develop differently in the phase of the life cycle. Like an early stage startup is high P, high E, very low A, very low I. But if you want to scale and where some of the challenges come, you've got to develop that A and you've got to develop that I. So from a CEO transition point of view, once the decision is made, what we try and do is recut that suit first. So say, okay, no names, but what's the clear vision and mission for this business? Because we then need to have a look at all the PAEI roles that the business actually requires. And what we first try and do is get the founder out of A, some of the P, and allow them to concentrate on the P roles that they really do enjoy, the E stuff that they often enjoy, and start to make a systemic I. And so what happens and why it takes quite a bit of time to transition properly is you can't just have like a big revolution if you want to do it in a functional manner. You say, okay, well, the founder's wearing 12 hats at the moment, which isn't uncommon. The hats that they really should look to hand over is only these 3 to begin with, but often founders have been told, just delegate, just bring in good people and give them space to do their job. Well, no, because if the system hasn't been built yet, delegation can turn into abdication. If you just bring somebody in and you don't have the right systems, process, controls, KPIs, procedures, all of that kind of stuff, and you bring someone externally in, it can be absolutely catastrophic, which is that whole article from Paul Graham around founder mode that came out. Because a lot of founders, to be good leaders, you bring in a big corporate structure, let them do their job, and it's catastrophic. Now, the answer isn't founder mode. The answer isn't stay in control of every bloody thing. There's actually a nuanced transitionary period, and every company's different, and it's got to have the vision and the mission for the next 3, 4, 5 years as the central thing, because your organizational structure needs to be perfectly suited to you. There is no one size fits all. And so organizational structure, then in the context of, okay, we've got a CEO or founder that wants to transition here. Either they want to start doing some other stuff, or they want to start doing less stuff, or they don't want to be there at all. That's fine. But we've got to recut this business. We've actually got to get PAEI functioning. We've got to get the managerial processes functioning, because founders are incredibly good, ones that have built great businesses. They're very good at seeing problems, making decisions, and getting them implemented. You take that energy out and you need a systemic way of doing that, it can be difficult.
So Don, it sounds like when you are going through this process, or if you are ahead and having these open conversations, it could also prevent a founder fully leaving a business. If you're having these conversations early enough, there may just be, like you're saying, of those 12 hats, if we remove 3, the founder's good, they're happy again. Is that something that we've seen previously in other companies as well?
100%. Like, that's such a good point. Like, there's 4 off the top of my head that I know of where they successfully managed it by identifying it early, like saying, I'm feeling this rising sense, or I'm heading towards this, and in 18 months or 2 years' time, I can see this happening. And for some, for 2 of them, it was actually moving to exit, so being acquired as their pathway. But for others, it's more about managing themselves in that process and identifying what they need. This is part of what we focus on at the offsites, right? Like, why we have this focus on the personal aspect, not just the business aspect. And to Don's point, there's a pretty small group of people that are qualified to help, but also you have to be conscious of who you're having those conversations with, because if it's internal, it can I've seen it play out in a destructive way.
Like, why I also like the CEO transition lead that Kirsten's taking here is, I would still suggest that even if the founder wasn't leaving, right? Because you need to have, like, at the most basic level, sometimes with some of these conversations, you just need a referee. You need someone independent. Like, it's hard for a founder who has built what they've built to then allow other people to come and put their fingerprints and start to do things differently. Now, sometimes the founder is right. Sometimes the founder is wrong, but when you don't actually have someone qualified and objective, that can actually help create the rails to run on. So with this CEO transition lead, like, if you're thinking of doing it, you need to have somebody competent and qualified that can assist. Now, if you have a look at Apple, right, and why we really don't want to see a situation where the founder is expelled, and it was only lucky that Jobs came back. But when you have a look, if there was a whole lot of work that founders they don't naturally like to do, that all got done when Jobs left the building, and then he came back. But that took like a decade, and Apple almost died. If you actually have a proper methodology to do it, it's sometimes a little bit complex and there are still points of conflict, but you can do it in a much shorter period of time that doesn't risk the death of the business, that actually sees the business go on to a stronger strength. Now we've got to be, this conversation is coming from obviously the Birchal situation. So we've got to be really mindful that a lot of the stuff I'm talking about here may not have any relevance to that situation because we don't know the situation. But in my experience, often founders can find it difficult sometime to really connect with how they're feeling, which makes it then difficult to connect with the board. Then sometimes investors and boards not covering themselves with glory because they don't create the space and the opening to actually have the conversations, or if they're too money focused, or if they're too growth focused, or their role is only to see X, Y, and Z happen, to hell with everything else, that also creates an environment where you're hardly going to get some of the best outcomes. So it's a difficult situation, but I think the learning is the earlier the better. Once you even start to get the inkling, the feeling, that sort of means that it is time, because those feelings tend not to just go away. And if you're thinking that you want to transition or whatever else, happy to share some ideas. But ultimately, I like what they've done with the CEO transition lead. You need to have that in place. And you just see it, like even we've discussed before, like Twiggy Forrest. It's a revolving door of executives. And we've seen some big tech companies, they've, for the first time, appointed the external CEO, and the founder is going to become executive chairman. What a recipe for disaster. Like it just generally ends up catastrophic, because the person that they hire, who's like professional CEOs or people that come from the outside that aren't founders, they tend to just be higher A, right? Because they didn't have the E in them to start their own thing. So they come into the business higher A. So their default is more towards more systems and processes and controls, which actually means slowing the business down sometimes. And what often happens is that it just leads to conflict between them and the founder, because underneath there wasn't like a systemic process. And then you see a revolving door. Oh, that person's out. We thank them for their service. It was a really great time. The founder's now coming back in. Then they get sick of it again, and in comes another CEO, and the people get blamed, like they weren't the right person. But actually, it's the underlying process, and that's what tends to be missing. But anyway, I could talk for years on this.
But on that point, I think Kirsten Hunter's a great choice for this role as the transition lead, because her background, her networks, she comes across as a deep integrator. I think she's a perfect choice for this.
Jack, your thoughts?
Oh, it's an interesting time for the crowdfunding ecosystem. Like Equitize called in the administrators late last year.
And then that sort of links into the next article by Bronwyn Clune of Capital Brief, The Rise of Zombie VCs. Australia venture capital faces a year of reckoning. When I read that, I thought to myself, well, what the fuck was 24? If this year is the year of reckoning, anyway, I thought we had that last year.
Maybe the year of the financial statements demonstrating the reckoning.
Yeah, but I mean, the crowdfunding was a little late to the party. Like their numbers were holding up longer before like VC had shit the bed. But yeah, Jack, it's a difficult time. Now in Bronwyn's article, it says venture capital in Australia is facing its toughest test yet as major players restructure and smaller funds hibernate. But new registrations suggest some resilience in the sector. So what's interesting is new registrations of ESVCLPs, of which Tribe is one, is actually up. Now, in the article, Bronwyn had interviewed Mick Lebinskas of Climate Salad, and he points out that there is a very big difference between starting an ESVCLP and actually raising a fund, which never a truer word spoken. And this article talks about Titanium Ventures, who's had Telstra as one of the largest LPs, but Telstra has pulled the pin and left. And Bronwyn talks about a number of firms being impacted. We've discussed the difficulty in funds and VC, so I don't think we need to flog the dead horse too much, other than if 2024 wasn't the year of reckoning, hold on to your hats for 25, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like we've been talking about this for 18 months, and it's just plain true. Everyone wants to be a VC until we get to this point, but I think people still want to be VCs. I actually think this is really healthy. I think it's a super healthy part of the cycle. I think Australia needs better VCs, not more. And I think there'll be a cleansing that's needed. And just cockroach it, baby.
That's it. And as long as you're too stupid to quit. But it's that balancing line. You want to be too stupid to quit, but come across smart enough to make some good investment decisions. And that can be difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
There was just one thing in here that I thought was particularly healthy, where Jesse points out that generally what happens and where VCs do become unstuck is when they're relying on the management fee of the next fund they're raising to keep the business alive. And so I think something at Tribe, which I think we do really well, is not thinking about that. And we have systems in place where we are self-sustaining as much as we can be. But it's just a really good call out for other VCs and just the market in general of going, hey, if you're relying on the next management fee to keep this business alive, there's no guarantee on that. And to your point, Aaron, that's healthy. You know, it's better VCs, not more. And so I think it's just a really good point that can get lost in an article like this.
Yeah, I saw in the last cycle some people get into it because they wanted to be a VC because it looked cool, but they saw the money side of life. But like every business, you've really got to like this, right? You've really got to like this game because of the volume of rejection, the volume of failure. You put money into an investment and then things don't go the way you think they would, especially in the first few years. So now you've got the expectations and obligations of these LPs that have backed your judgment, and you've got your own money in there as well. And you're then sitting looking at the portfolio, and there's always these periods of time, especially the post-investment lull that we talk about. Like the founders have been raising capital for 6 to 12 months. All the energy's gone there. Like the 6 months after the investment closing is always a catastrophic time period. Now, we do our best to try and understand what's going to occur, educate the LPs, and help the founders through so they don't do any silly things to arbitrarily make up numbers. It's a difficult world, and you got to fucking love it.
Yeah, Don, I'd actually say you've got to like really, really love it, just because like it's not a traditional business. Like we don't have the cash flow that startups actually have, the luxury, like the recurring revenue of selling a subscription.
You had a beautiful head of hair, Jack.
I know. Exactly.
It used to flow in the wind.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think, and it's such a hard game because of the time horizon. So the 10-year return, like it's a long game, and you've got to love it.
I think people get caught up in the financial aspect. Like you look at the return of the outlier funds, but the power law distribution of that, it is just a sea of disappointment to get these wins that make up for everything else. But when you're in the trenches with the founders, like you're constantly in their battles and hearing their challenges and problems. So you have to love that bit of the work. Otherwise, there's much easier ways to make money.
Yeah.
Like much easier.
It sounds like my primary school report cards. A sea of disappointment. Now, speaking of a sea of disappointment, there was an article out on AFR of how much LinkedIn is turning into a sea of disappointment. They use the word slop. Now, while that's interesting for us as a B2B investor, a lot of our deal flow, a lot of our investors, and a lot of like LinkedIn is probably one of our largest channels of engaging in the market, sharing this content. And so this article in the AFR, written by Tess Bennett, says, first there was broetry, then came the pandemic era of oversharing personal circumstances with colleagues, past and present. This year, LinkedIn users face a flood of long posts filled with moral lessons, uplifting messages, and tales of triumph and tragedy. Tess uses an example. I'm 35. When I was younger, I battled to get sober, had my company raided by the government, traveled the world, and then started multiple 8-figure companies. One post on the Microsoft-owned platform read, I think my post was a little different to that, but anyway, before continuing on with 11 tips from the author to his younger self. Now, I'll share my screen because it's a bit early for charts, but this is a proper chart. So in the article, it shows like 2019 to 2023 when ChatGPT enters, and AI content from Feb 23 jumps like 189%. But what's interesting in this next chart is the correlation between LinkedIn posts and word count. The word count of LinkedIn has more than doubled since the introduction of ChatGPT, which sort of makes sense. But the problem is it's continuing to go up and to the right. Now, I think we were discussing earlier in the week, I must admit, when I see a post that's got more than 3 lines, I don't even bother. I'm not even, I can't be. And with my posts, I try to keep it to 1 line only, and then a irrelevant picture that adds no value but gets laughs. That's my that's my strategy.
Memes for the win.
Yeah, and so in the article it says, so Originality AI, where this data comes from, analysed nearly 9,000 posts that were longer than 100 words between 2018 and 2024. Amongst its findings, the length of LinkedIn's posts since ChatGPT launched has increased by 107%. These posts were likely to receive, however, half the level of engagement. So I think that's the key point here, that actually you're not getting rewarded for that shit. And this little picture, this little cartoon, I thought it's almost like that. What's that bell curve with the Neanderthals? What's the meme called, Jack?
The midwit.
Midwit, yeah. Like on the left, AI turns this single bullet point into a long email I can pretend I wrote. But then at the other end, AI makes a single bullet point out of this long email I can pretend I read. And that is so true for LinkedIn at the moment.
The irony that
the takeaway for founders here is, if it's working, keep doing it. If it's not, like adjust something, keep tweaking it, and keep firing different shots.
And the key part of that is making sure for founders, like make sure you are measuring, are things actually working, and measuring the right metric, not just views, but are you actually getting conversions? Are you getting engagement? Are you getting new leads into the top of the funnel?
Yeah, and for us, like, our strategy is reasonably clear. We've got this, but then we run events. We run fireside chats with actual fire, and we try and get people there. And the people can then see what we have to say. And out of that, either founders want to engage with us or hopefully investors want to engage with us. So really, for us, it all comes down to that. Yeah.
And it is that reminder, like increasingly more and more you have to be relevant and be human. And that's why, Don, your memes work because they have humor. They're not a generic, like,
they generally come from a very sad place, though, of deep pain and unresolved traumas.
I got asked the other day if you have a meme generator that makes all this stuff up. I said, no, I think it just gets fed to him on his feeds.
Ash?
Nothing, Dad.
Well, at least put something into ChatGPT and get a response and then say it to us.
Well played. Well played.
I think it's going to continue to come back to relevance and reciprocity, right? As we've said in one of the previous articles from one of Harry Stebbing's podcasts, if you got a handwritten letter with your name and it's clearly somebody went to the effort, you'd be a psychopath to throw it in the bin. Like, that's the reciprocity bit. And then the relevance bit is it relevant? And that's where I think some of the AI tools can help you get information about relevance. But yeah, a lot of this long-winded stuff. Like, I saw one post this morning. Ever since I started as a freelance HR consultant, I've been inundated with requests to understand how I did it. So I've created a course on, it's like, fuck off, you got inundated with requests on how you did that.
On the personal letter piece. So Don, you and I both got identical letters in the PO box from a founder raising capital, and it has a letter. It's not handwritten, it's typed.
Just to confirm, have I been given this letter? Because I'm about to feel really bad. No, okay.
Not yet. I'll see you tomorrow. And a USB stick. But the problem is,
do not put a USB stick in your
100%.
Cybersecurity, absolutely not.
So this is exactly the issue. So I was going to use my son's laptop. So
I have a feeling, is this, what else do you use your son's laptop for? But anyway, keep going.
Yeah.
No, well,
that's a good
I had the exact same thought.
To the next article, Don.
But what a good way for cyber attacks, right? Like, make out you're a founder sending your pitch on a USB stick to all listed managing partners of funds.
So last week I was going to mention, but one of the predictions I do have is I think the QR code is going to die, because the ability, if you've seen online, for the fraudsters to actually just go and stick their own QR code that makes it really hard to see on all of these other QR codes, and then make something that a lot of people don't realize. Like when you're sitting in a pub now, I scratch it to see if it was actually the one. But I'm seeing all this stuff online that, especially with the government, they rolled out a whole lot of QR codes for like information things at beaches and different things.
Yeah.
But then fraudsters just go and put their own little QR code sticker on it. And then I think one of the ones I saw was paying for parking. Go and use the QR code to pay for your parking. So you do that and the whole user experience looks fine. The only problem is the money's not going to the government. It's going to some fraudster that's collecting, at least for a period of time until they get found out, everyone's parking money.
Yeah.
Clever.
Maren and I were at a bar the other night, and there was a QR code on the table and we scanned it. It was actually for the takeaway food place across the lane. They'd just gone in and stuck stickers on the table, and the staff was saying, they just all appeared one day. It's actually not for ordering from our venue. It's like, okay.
So yeah, that's a prediction. Well, so LinkedIn is a channel, right? And there's many different channels, but sometimes what we find in life is exactly the same product can be worth more in one channel than the other. Now, there was a post by Zara Dar. People may not know this, but I publish the same STEM videos on both YouTube and Pornhub. While YouTube generates more views, the ad revenue per 1 million views on Pornhub is nearly 3 times higher. So per million views, $340 on YouTube. On Pornhub, over $1,000. Now, I had to Google what Pornhub was, just so I could familiarize for this episode. But yeah,
I have, like, there's so many questions about this one. Like, first of all, is this legit or just totally a really smart marketing strategy for perhaps another channel that this particular author might be on?
Well, can I maybe I could explain some new STEM things to you that I didn't know previously. So no other direction to take this one in?
No.
Ash, could you anything to contribute, or am I on my own little island here?
Yeah, you're on the island with no way to get out.
Well, one of you did say, is this even true? So now that this should have probably been fact checked, which I did fact check, and it is true. But speaking of fact checking, Meta now has totally removed all fact checking from third party fact checking, and has also scrapped some diversity policies. I think pretty well all diversity policies. And this all seems to be on the back of Trump coming back in. I think for our industry, it is going to have some effects because it is going to flow back to us locally.
I wonder how much this is timed with Trump coming back into power, because during his last, presidency, there was so much tension with Meta fact-checking posts and all that criticism. So is Mark just going, screw it, I'm out. I'd rather avoid the political attention and just make it a free-for-all.
Well, it's cheaper. It's easier. Yeah. And when I have been on the X1, it's not totally pointless. Like some posts, then you see the community notes and then it points out what the community has said. That's not going to be foolproof. But this article points out that not that the third-party fact-checking was all that effective. In its last reporting via Australia's Code of Practice on Misinformation and Disinformation, Meta apparently took action on less than 10,000 pieces of content for violating misinformation policies. And this isn't 10,000 different posts or falsehoods currently being corrected. In November, Meta's 3 registered fact-checkers only checked 6 Australian-focused posts and only 3 in December. For over 20 million Facebook users in Australia, this is such a drop in the ocean, it's barely worth noting. So it's not like they were doing much anyway.
No.
I think the best thing was the amount of focus on Mark's watch from this video. That's where all the hype's been.
It has been.
900,000 on a watch. Must be nice.
But with his hair now and the gold chain and the shirts, there's someone that has entered like this phase of sovereignty where it's like, I am me.
You mean founder mode?
Partly. The big one, Meta, like so many others, has totally killed off the DEI department. It says Meta says it's still committed to hiring a diverse workforce in Australia, despite its billionaire chief executive Mark Zuckerberg lamenting the rise of culturally neutered companies due to global efforts to make workplaces more equitable. Meta, which owns Instagram and WhatsApp, told employees over the weekend that it was disbanding its global diversity and equity inclusion team. He says the term DEI has become charged is in part because it is understood by some as a practice that suggests preferential treatment of some groups over others. Now, interestingly, there was also an article in the AFR that spoke to a number of Australia's tech players. So this was from Paul Smith. Luke Kinnear from Safety Culture was interviewed. It says here, Luke Kinnear, who founded Safety Culture, said Australia could only dream to clean up layers of permission and governance like Musk and billionaire biotech business Vivek Ramaswamy plan to do in the US as co-heads of Trump's new Department of Efficiency. He talks about Musk. He says Musk said it took longer to process the paperwork for a space flight than it did to build the actual spaceship. Given Elon's record with the truth, I'm unsure whether that's actually going to be true. But then Luke talks about some of the DEI stuff. He says the US hasn't bought as much into the virtue signaling from companies trying to look good by setting diversity metrics and imposing the process on hiring teams. However, he goes on to say he has seen examples in the US where underperforming employees are not being disciplined because of the color of their skin. This is ironic. This, ironically, is the very definition of discrimination. Some employers are afraid of providing consequences for fear of a discrimination claim. Each case needs to be judged on its own merits and a balanced perspective required. So there's a lot of change and a lot of stuff happening here. I will say in the same article, Jessie Wu, who we mentioned earlier, who quit as a partner at Afterwork Ventures last year to start her own startup communications agency, says she's optimistic that a reassessment of DEI programs will ultimately lead to a more sophisticated approach to workplace diversity. At times, it can be a performative attempt to band-aid over the root cause of homogeneity, she says, describing some diversity and inclusion programs as paint by numbers. There's a lot happening here. This is... What's interesting, the last time we went to the US, I do agree with Luke, they seem to be far less obsessed with sort of underlying programs outside of what is the outcome that we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, totally agree. And same in the UK when we're there. And people from those markets who spend time in the Australian ecosystem comment about our focus on those things. And I do think we do tend to follow UK, US, so I think this trend will continue. I like Jessie Wu's quote in there. I do hope this is an evolution rather than a complete swing in the opposite direction, but I think an evolution that is a bit healthier for all.
I think there's multiple aspects to this article, but the one that comes to the surface for me is the efficiency piece. Like, there are some sassy words in here, but I love the energy, and I do think that from a country which has a lot to offer on the innovation space, as well as, particularly the resource space, which is highlighted in this article, we need to remove some red tape to compete on a global scale, particularly with the likes of China putting more and more capital into innovation and exporting it and doing it quickly. And we have far more red tape, particularly whether it's in space or infrastructure or renewables, than most countries around the world. So we're not leading the world in the renewable development, even though strategically from a natural resource standpoint, we should be. So I do think there is some truth to this. And look, I don't really want Elon Musk to come here and do it for us, but if we could try something, then I think it would be good for all the founders and innovators in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need more regulatory sandboxes for innovators to actually go and experiment within. We can mitigate for the risk by just putting it into a limited category or scope. But yeah, bring that on.
Jack?
I've got nothing to add there, Dom.
I mean, when I read a lot of this stuff that's happening is that broadly humanity, I do think, improves, but it's not without like a sine curve. We have our ups and our downs. I have a broad feeling that we've got a bit of a down at the moment, but you can't really in my experience, move to a better, more centered place without sometimes going further than you should. And like on some of the DEI aspects, I think what's happening is instead of people trying to remedy some blatantly stupid and ridiculous shit, like they're throwing the whole baby out with the bathwater, we have a belief that diversity leads to better outcomes. It can be sometimes hard to achieve, but there has been some things now with the wildfires in the US as an example. The first things that a whole lot of people did was blame DEI because the LA police chief was the amount of money that's gone into DEI programs. But the problem is some people get really upset with some of the stuff that these programs do. And there was a video going around that I think is genuine, and with the world of deep fakes, it's hard to work out. But there was a video promoting the DEI aspects of the LA firefighting. There was an interview with someone that was African-American, lesbian, in charge of a firefighting unit. And in the interview, she said, I often get asked the value of diversity, and I say it's important that when people arrive to put your fire out that they look like you. And it's like, well, no, I just want my fire out. I'm not sure I need someone that looks like me. And then the video goes on and says, and some people ask me, like, if my husband was passed out in that environment, how would you lift him and bring him out? And my response to that is, well, your husband shouldn't have gotten into that situation in the first place. And it's like, that's going to piss people off, because the purpose has to be surely like the saving the people, the saving the houses. That's got to be the thing that we're optimizing for. And if you can't do the role, when people then get told, well, you should do something else, or you shouldn't have gone into that position, people get pissed. People go, this is lunacy. And so then what happens is babies get thrown out with the bathwater. Now, I think the pendulum will now swing too far back, and life will just continue to hopefully go up and to the right, but it's not going to be without its back and forths. And I think people, if we can just try and be a little bit more centered, but yeah, life tends not to be that simple.
We don't only invest in B2B tech companies, we also run missions over to the US and the UK, as well as offsite, which we open up to the broader ecosystem. That's founders, that's investors.
Our missions are about taking founders and investors into the UK and US markets so that, one, they can understand what it takes to scale into those markets and set up shop in those markets, but also to see over the horizon into the latest tech, how capital's being allocated so that they can come back home and transform and scale their business.
Yeah, I like the way we put on panels of founders that have been there and done it, panels of investors. So then that way they get some time pitching to US or UK investors, the channel partners that we put them in touch with. It's really trying to get them into market so they can establish exactly what they need to do in order to scale a really great business over there.
Yeah, we really prioritize this not being tech tourism or something that you could simply YouTube or Google or GPT the answer to from home. It's really about experiencing and immersing in these environments where you viscerally experience scale. You get to understand disruption and how these technologies are actually being applied in market, and therefore how you can navigate and build a scalable business into those markets.
If this is something of interest, shoot us a DM. And enough of that, back to the podcast.
Well, while we're on the topic of Mark, again, not wanting to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because I do genuinely think a lot of the stuff Facebook have done is bad for the world. It's bad for kids and bad for everything else. But bad people can still have good messages from time to time. This was a little video that came out.
The product strategy, less as any one specific thing, and more as how do we iterate and learn as quickly as possible how to make each thing better for the people we're trying to serve, right? So like I define our strategy as we can learn faster than every other company, we're going to win. We're going to build a better product than everyone else because we're going to get it out first. We're early. We're going to have a good feedback loop. We're going to get a bunch of feedback. We're going to learn what people like better than other people. And then over time, by the time you get to whether it's version 3 or 4 or 5, and they're not even discrete versions because we ship so frequently, you learn faster. So I think that's basically the formula.
I think that is basically the formula. And one of the key points there is who do you serve and what's your purpose in life? And that's where I think some DEI things need to just get better reframed. Like, what is the purpose here? What is the vision? What do we actually need to achieve? Okay, now we will backfill that. But companies that can do what Mark has just described there are the ones that win.
Decision making is so much simpler when you know what you're trying to achieve. But it's amazing how many times we get caught in trying to make decisions, not being clear on the objective.
And Ash, you spend a bit of time in the corporate innovation sort of space, and some of our companies get to a point where they almost feel a bit corporate-like and they slow down. Like, where do you see them going wrong?
It's a mix of red tape, bureaucracy, but it's generally agency and people who, even though they technically have the right to sign off on spending X amount, if you are no longer comfortable doing that and you require checking with another 5 people around you or someone above you, then you've lost it. You've lost the magic of what makes a startup grow, and even just a small business or a large scale business, if we're talking the likes of a safety culture, those type of businesses, if you don't feel like you have the ability to make those calls and continue to move fast, iterate and test quickly, and then if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But as soon as I hear someone say, oh yeah, I have the authority to sign that, but I'm just going to run it past another 5 or 6 people, that's the first red flag. And it's generally the one that is easiest to identify. And then you can untangle the web from there.
Would you add to that as well, Ash, like autonomy to operate, but also permission to fail or looking at the consequences of failure?
Yeah, I think they go hand in hand, because most people are having that call to check with 5 people because they're frightened that if it does fail, their head's on the chopping block. And that culture of being able to test, and most things, once you get to that scale, you're not going to break or blow up the business. There are risks and protocols in place, and so it is that appetite to also push the boundary that you lose. And when you're not pushing the boundary and thinking about the next evolution of a business, that's when you generally see them stall and then have to go to external help. And even the businesses that have internal innovation teams, what we have seen over the past 5 years in particular is they're only looking at your core innovation. If you're thinking about the Horizon model from McKinsey, they're only looking at the Horizon 1, not 2, not 3. And so you're losing that future generation of what we're looking at. And so I think that's where a lot of businesses, as they grow, they need to have people whose sole job is not only to think about the strategy on a Horizon 3 timeline, but also product development. What else could we be investing in? And that may be putting small amounts of dollars into startups that are around them in a similar ecosystem so they can learn and see what's happening as well.
Yeah, I think they're such good points. I had a similar experience with some limited innovation work in the corporate environment, but interestingly also in government. Craig O'Kane, who's worked both for the UK government and the Australian and Queensland government, he gave this really good metaphor for it once. He said in the UK government, it's like you've been handed the keys to the Jag and you're told, bring it back, scratched up, on fire, like go and experiment, go and try different policies, go and try different programs, see what works. And he said the Queensland government was the opposite. It's like they don't even give you the keys. You're driving in the passenger seat of a Commodore and they expect it to end up like a Mercedes. And he said it's just a completely different experience. There's no risk tolerance. They're completely afraid of that career mail front page moment. And because that affects all of their decision making. And we've seen that play out with Advanced Queensland. We've seen it play out with the VCDF. Like, I think it's a different dynamic in the government, but similar behavioural patterns at play.
I thought we promised not to bring up the VCDF. I thought this was the year that we.
The scar still runs deep.
Yeah. Jack, anything? Oh, sorry.
I just want to say on the sandbox piece as well, Aaron, it all ties back to that as well from a policy perspective. And I will say that from the corporate innovation side, we have seen government have a little bit more willingness to at least come to the table and for you to have a conversation. So I would say to founders that if they're is something you're working on that needs a policy change to make it happen, or you think the regulators might not have the appetite, I would urge them to have conversations early, because I do think that there are people inside those organizations that do have that risk appetite and want to make change. So don't just try one person and give up if they give you a no, but continue to have conversations. And as your idea is continually to be validated and you can show them market appetite, just continue to have those conversations with policymakers, as I do think we are seeing some small gains. But if you go to them when the product's ready and you expect a policy change in even 12 months, you're dreaming. That should be a long time horizon of continuous conversation. Bring them into the tent, make them feel like they are part of what you're building, so that they're more likely to be your internal champion as well.
Yeah, I like it. No, that's some really good advice. Jack?
I've got nothing to add to that one, done.
Well, let's just get into some themes of the week. Ash, kick us off.
I feel like I always have to kick it off.
A for Ash.
Yeah, I know. I see how you did that. Yeah,
It should be AA for Aaron. Sorry, Ash.
Yeah, that's
No,
what I thought.
DEI. No, Ash has to go first.
As I alluded to earlier, in the past week, there's been a lot of conversations with people who are coming off break. Some are really energized, have seen and just really observed is the thing I'm picking up on, particularly those people with children, where they're observing how they are interpreting the world, the tools that they're looking to pick up and use. In particular, conversations around AI and kids using it and how they're interacting with it, and what we can learn from how kids interact with AI in our day-to-day has been particularly interesting for me. So trying to really put my child lens on, and that curiosity of, if I was a 10-year-old or 15-year-old and I was trying to figure something out, how would I use that constant curiosity and question, just drive to utilize AI to find a outcome or to find a tool that I can leverage to find that hole in whatever I'm trying to do. That's been a big theme for me, just listening to people who have kids and going, oh, so what did you do on your break? And the ones that have connected those dots have said, oh, well, I was looking at how my kids were playing in the ocean, then we're coming home and they couldn't figure out how to do something. So instead of asking me, they spoke to GPT or Claude or whatever it was, and then came back to me and said, oh, so I was thinking about this and I utilized this and this is where I got. And so just really using that curiosity as a game changer for you and your everyday.
I like it. Aaron?
I think for me this week, it's been a reminder of just how much Australia does shut down for pretty much the entirety of December and January. Trying to chase people and just getting out of offices, and seeing so many of our investors in the syndicate in Japan and elsewhere at the moment, all enjoying winter wonderlands around the world.
Is this a passive-aggressive approach to getting me to sign DocuSigns?
No, but it is that reminder for founders, like this time of year, like being aware of it, and particularly in the space we play in, like with the investor side, the high net worth community, founders need to be aware of that. And I think for me as well, like just dovetailing off that, is like the importance of spending time on nurturing relationships. And it's one of my little things for this year is just to have a bit of a refocus there. It's something I haven't done that well in the last kind of 12 months.
But on that, Aaron, founders should also note that the UK and US don't shut down.
Oh, 100%.
It's a great opportunity at the end of Jan, at the end of Jan to jump on a plane and go spend time in those areas where they're not shut down and you're not missing anything in Oz. So use that time to build those relationships, to have those conversations and demonstrate to them that even though you're in Australia and they know Australia shuts down, you're still hustling.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
And it's something we see all the time. Like taking a mission over to those markets in that window would be perfect, but no Aussie wants to go in that window. But you're absolutely spot on with that, Ash.
Jack?
Theme for this week for me has just been the importance of managing family and work, just getting that balance right. And then because I'm not working from the in-laws place, so I'm working from the granny flat of our new place. So first time being away from Anna with a newborn, but just make sure I'm managing that.
Yeah, mine's a little similar. It's just like managing self, managing family, managing all the stuff, and I'm trying to get, like, I bought this big novelty calendar thing just to try and map out the year, but it's just scary how like 12 months is fuck all. Like I look at it and go, hang on, we've still got to run fireside chats. We've still got to get down to the other states. We've got to be doing our fund thing, but it's like efficiency and admin and time management and all of that.
It's true for me too.
Well, in 5 minutes, I've got a au pair coming for an interview. Speaking of which,
From where?
lives up the road apparently.
No,
Country. Argentina.
Great. Good
awesome.
language. Spanish is good language to learn. Very.
See.
Oh Lord.
So let's get into some charts quickly. This is the real GDP per capita of New Zealand. And I know a lot of people in New Zealand's really struggling at the moment. So they were doing really well up until pre-COVID. Then COVID, they got smashed. They did a lot of stimulus, but their inflation rates and a whole lot of other things have really killed their real GDP per capita. And it's well and truly off trend. And I don't know exactly what they're going to do to solve that, but I'm hearing not a lot of positive things out of New Zealand. Now, often in Australia and the US, there's a lot of talk about our debt, but this came from a Capital Brief article. This is the percentage of debt relative to GDP. Now, whilst Australia talks about maybe closing in on $1 trillion debt, we're still nowhere near the US and the United Kingdom. And even New Zealand, with its real GDP issues, it's still its GDP to debt is only at about 50%. Australia's like 38, Canada's at 50 something. So on a relative basis, we're still much better than the US and the UK. My fear with all of this stuff is we seem to be spending a lot of money on stuff that's not improving the country's efficiency and effectiveness and infrastructure. And like another $6 billion on the NBN in a world of satellite internet connection, like it just doesn't make sense.
Should have spoke to Elon.
I've always said I love the guy. This is defense spending as a percentage of GDP, but then the distance you are from Moscow. So it plots out all of these countries, how far they are from Moscow. And the closer you are to Moscow, the percentage that you spend on defense is much higher versus those that are further away from Moscow. So the closer you are to that place, the more you've got to keep your borders a little defended. This is the Bitcoin price and then the miner revenue in US millions per day. And you can see that they tend to march together. Now, there has been a bit of a disconnect of the Bitcoin price and the miner price at the end of last year. So the question is this saying that miner revenue is going to come up, or is the Bitcoin price going to come down? Interesting. Now, correlation doesn't mean causation and all that jazz, but it's a chart nonetheless. Ash, I see you squinting, going, just don't. This is not necessary. So I put my life savings into NVIDIA. This is a post on Wall Street Bets. Timing is everything. But what they did was they put it into a 3x leverage position. And you can see in 2018, they took a 3x leverage position. But then when COVID happened, their 3x leverage position shit itself. If they just held on, right, they're like, what was it? Probably like a £20,000 investment would be over 2 million. And this is what happens, right? Leverage is like rat poison. And so many people get caught up in this trap. Whereas you don't need leverage for some of these things. But I see it all the time. And people that got rich with a lot of leverage tend to not see the warning signals to get rid of the leverage, and then they go broke really quick. And that's that. This is the path of a GPS. This is a GPS path of a swimmer crossing the English Channel. And it's a big wave, and some prick at the top goes, why didn't he just swim in a straight line? Well, obviously the tides, I didn't realize, but it takes you're not swinging just the distance. You're swimming a lot more because of the in and outgoing tide through that channel.
Yeah, huge tidal flows.
There's an analogy in life in there, I'm sure. This isn't a chart. I just thought this was true. Having $0 in debt and zero assets is stressful. Having 35 million in debt and assets is stressful. Being poor is stressful. Becoming rich is stressful. Staying rich is stressful. Life is stressful. So if you're going to be stressed regardless, why not be stressed trying to live an extraordinary life as opposed to the alternative? And if it doesn't work out like the way you planned, you'll just end up where you were anyway, poor and stressed.
Love it. Founder mode.
Then there's this book someone's come up with. Everything I Don't Like is Woke. A book for basic dickheads. And he's pointing at an engine. This engine is woke. And that's so true. For a lot of things, the woke word gets overused. If this isn't a shart, I don't know what is. Brian Johnson, that guy that's doing the biohacking and like trying to live forever.
Yep.
You then combine that with the US where you can bet on everything. Polymarket brought out a betting market where you can actually bet on the length of his nighttime erections. You can actually put money on it. So it's the combination of two.
And this is legit? This has been
Yeah, no, checked it. I checked it. I went in. It is legit. You can actually bet on it. Coming to the new year, control ego when you're winning. Control your thoughts when you're losing. If you can do that, you can do anything. I think that's, and it comes back to that pendulum a little bit. Like when everything's wonderful and great, probably just pull it back a little. And when things are shit, it tends to not be that bad. Pull that back a little. Try and stay a little centered. And then finally, which is more important? Asked the big panda. The journey or the destination? The company, said the tiny dragon.
Ah, that's a nice one to end on, Don.
What are we looking forward to?
Oh, Jack, you go first.
Oh, I haven't even thought about the weekend, to be honest. I don't have anything.
That's lame. Try again.
Well, you go first, Ash.
I'm looking forward to this afternoon. I've got to catch up with Aaron and Jack to finalize some of the documents for our Fund 1 data room. So very excited. We'll be launching the fund in a couple of weeks. So yeah, all steam ahead. And Don, don't worry, you'll get a task list too.
I'm ready. Aaron?
I have a similar one, Ash. I'm looking forward to people being back on deck so we can start sprinting. It feels like I just want people back so we can get going. So I'm excited for that.
One more chance, Jack.
I'm excited to finish quarterly updates.
Hey!
And I'm excited to start them again. All right, I got a dash. My interviewee is here, so I've got to go do that. I'm excited for some help.
Awesome. Thanks, team.
All right, team.
You guys.
Bye.